Herman Cain, while he might not be the GOP nominee for president, he'll definitely be a deciding factor in what happens in the GOP field. I think his creative 999 tax plan is something that the American people definitely understand. I think he's going to definitely face some challenges against President Obama. But I think he's definitely brought some jazz to the GOP field of candidates. You can't come to the negotiating table, Martha, without bringing something to the negotiating table. And I think the president has been very clear in saying he's willing to cut the oil subsidies, cut the loopholes to corporate jet owners, and in return he's asking them to raise the debt ceiling, and he's also willing to make a lot of discretionary cuts, including $100 million at the Pentagon. They say that if we increase state tuition that will crush state budgets. Well, a lot of Republican state governors have given away big corporate tax cuts this past year, and that doesn't make the point that these folks are Americans. These folks are residents of their state. A lot of these folks were sitting in the same classrooms we sat in a couple years ago. They are as much American as we are. They were brought here to no fault of their own, and they deserve a legal path to citizenship. If you were a Fortune 500 CEO, you'd be like, well, we're really not uncertain of what the government's going to do. We know the Republicans are holding this debt ceiling and this budget debate crisis hostage, and therefore we can't really make hiring decisions. We saw that when the president passed the budget deal during the first shutdown, which was in the April time frame, how we saw a decrease in the unemployment numbers due to the fact that these companies felt assured that the president and the government were going to get their act together. And I think there is an enthusiasm gap. I think what we've seen from the president in the past couple months is him trying to bridge that gap. We've seen with the Jobs Act, he's pushed parts of the jobs bill that will benefit young people directly. The part that failed in the Senate today, which is the transportation portion, will put young people back to work directly. I think what the president is trying to say is that what we're seeing from the GOP is they want to use a machete to cut the budget, and the president's saying we need to be very smart about how we make our cuts, and we need to use a scalpel blade, and that's exactly what this budget does. This budget does not increase spending. It keeps spending levels the same. It just reallocates how the money is done. The budget also creates efficiency. So the blah, blah, blah that my colleague talks about is actual efficiencies. Before, case in point, in the Department of Transportation, they had 33 different offices administering highway grants. Under the president's plan, there'll only be 5 offices administering those same highway grants. This is efficiency. This is what we call cutting government waste and making a smarter and more efficient government. I think we have to make smart investments in our country. We saw what FDR did when we were faced with the economic depression in the 1930s. What he did was he invested in America's greatest resource, its people. And that's what we need to see from President Obama. We saw that in the Jobs Act. You invest in teachers, nurses, firefighters, and police officers. You build our roads back. You build high-speed rail, which is something we're one of the only developed countries in this world that does not have high-speed rail. And this will not only employ young people, but also employ all people. I'm just not really sure what that's going to do for him. At the end of the day, the budget of Texas is still sort of, taking on water. And he might be a good fundraiser, but I'm not sure if he's going to have the capabilities to mount a campaign that could first compete with Mitt Romney and also compete with Michelle Bachmann, as well as compete with President Obama in November of 2012.
Sherry, who do you like?
All three are very bad news for President Obama.
I disagree here, though. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I just don't think Perry's right for the Republican ticket. I think he's going to have a hard time convincing rank-and-file Republicans to join him. And, since he's been governor, we've seen even though people say that they're creating a lot of jobs in Texas, to what avail? He's made tons and tons of cuts. He's cut education by 30%. And, the only reason why the Texas economy is still afloat is because of President Obama's stimulus dollars. The Democrats have been willing to push forward the DREAM Act. They pushed forward in the last Congress. Mind you, the DREAM Act is a Republican ideal that's endorsed by George W. Bush himself. So the DREAM Act is something that the people and the dreamers out there truly need, so they can fulfill the American dream, and we're blocking that. As the movement has taken hold in New York and D.C. and Seattle and Los Angeles and all across the country, we've seen them become more and more organized. They've set up tents for media check-ins, they've set up information tents, and the movement continues to move, and they're gaining support. I mean, Mayor Bloomberg was trying to kick them out of the New York park a couple of days ago. And people said, no, we're not getting kicked out the park. People are upset, and they're angry at Wall Street for the corporate greed that has continued to take hold in this country.
In terms of international support, how important is that to you? Because the issues that you're talking about is something that affects people across the globe.
You're completely correct. I think we've seen what's happening in the Muslim Spring. It's about people uprising against what they don't believe in. We saw that also with the Tea Party here in America. Across the world, we're getting to see people rise up, and they're trying to change their situation and make it better. And I think that's what the root of this movement is.